It's hard to imagine a more spectacular place on Earth than British Columbia. But there is a looming danger. The proposed Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline through the vast mountain ranges of the interior and associated tanker traffic along the pristine BC coast threaten not only this vastly diverse, wild and sacred ecosystem. This big oil-backed project threatens the health, livelihood and future of tens of thousands of people who call British Columbia home. The proposed pipeline begins in neighboring Alberta, at the site of one of the largest, most polluting and destructive energy projects on Earth, the Alberta tar sands. Already, thousands of hectares of ancient boreal forest have been destroyed by Canadian and international oil companies. Thousands of tons of contaminated wastewater from Alberta's tar sands become a highly contaminated, toxic slurry spewed into massive tailings lakes that already stretch 130 square kilometers and leak 11 million liters into the once pollution-free Athabasca watershed every day. Downstream First Nations communities who consider these waterways their lifeblood are now suffering from increased cancer rates and other deadly diseases linked to tar sands operations. The highly profitable 1,170-kilometer proposed Northern Gateway pipeline would link Alberta's tar sands to Kitimat on the coast of northern British Columbia. A westbound pipeline would carry 525,000 barrels of heavy crude daily. At the same time, an eastbound line would transmit 193,000 barrels of condensate, a mixture of chemicals and petroleum used to thin the thick, tarry crude for transport. The oil from this pipeline would be sold to countries like South Korea and China to meet their growing demands for transportation fuels. Big oil companies intent on expanding their tar sands oil markets beyond Canada and the U.S. are now looking to Asia, where climate regulations are likely to remain weak, allowing for more polluting fossil fuels. Tar sands strip mining and drilling operations currently produce about 40 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. Experts warn that if this pipeline is built, tar sands oil production will increase by another 30%. This means 6.5 million additional tons of toxic greenhouse gases will pour into the air every year, making the tar sands the single largest contributor to the growth of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions. Once the $5.5 billion pipeline enters British Columbia, those 700,000 barrels of petroleum products per day will cross or run parallel to more than 1,000 streams and rivers. Just one pipeline leak could jeopardize the Skeena and Upper Fraser watersheds, polluting drinking water and destroying or severely damaging two of the largest and highest quality wild salmon ecosystems in the world. Runoff and discharge into rivers from pipeline construction also pose life-threatening risks to salmon and the numerous communities that depend on them. The proposed Enbridge pipeline would cross the territories of more than 30 interior First Nations, many of whom have been fighting the Enbridge pipeline since the beginning.
What we're looking for our survival as Wet'suwet'en, and what the general public around us would be looking for is the same thing. And I think it's really important for us to think about our commonalities. We could lose this all. That's my greatest fear.
If there's an oil spill, we stand to lose everything that we know. We will become the land of what used to be. Whether you're a municipality, regional district, a nation of people, a landowner, a homesteader, don't matter. You're going to suffer the consequences if there's an oil spill. The opportunity is now for all of us to put those individual responsibilities together as a collective and fight this fight, because we will only have one chance.
The pipeline would also threaten the extremely rare ecosystems of BC's pristine north coast, home of the Great Bear Rainforest, which, at nearly 8.5 million hectares, is part of the largest remaining coastal temperate rainforest in the world. The Great Bear Rainforest is rich in grizzly bear, wolf, and mountain goat habitat, as well as world-class spawning rivers and lakes for coho, sockeye, and Chinook salmon. The National Energy Board has warned that large-diameter oil pipelines, such as the proposed Northern Gateway pipelines, periodically fail from corrosion and stress. The two Enbridge pipelines would operate in treacherously steep terrain, where significant avalanche, earthquake, and landslide dangers would increase stress on the pipelines and the possibility of failure. Leaks and pipeline breaks are nothing new. Between 2003 and 2007, Enbridge pipelines ruptured an average of 66 times per year, spilling more than 38,000 barrels of oil. Once the Enbridge pipeline reaches Kitimat, one of the world's most toxic carbon-intensive oils would then be loaded onto massive foreign-bound supertankers called very large crude carriers, nearly a quarter of a mile in length and a capacity of more than 2 million barrels of oil. It's anticipated that approximately 225 condensate and crude oil tankers a year would attempt to navigate an extremely treacherous 240-kilometer route to and from the open ocean. A journey that includes Wright Sound, where the Queen of the North passenger ferry slammed into Gill Island in 2006 and is still leaking oil.
If you have an oil spill, it's not here for a day. It's here for an extremely long time. And what we noticed with the whole BC ferry incident is that BC is not set up to deal with an oil spill. That's what we saw right away. And that is terrifying. That is terrifying.
Filled to capacity, very large crude carriers display 70 feet underwater, which makes the proposed tanker route even more harrowing, as the sea giants attempt to navigate extremely shallow areas and constricted narrow passages riddled with pinnacles and reefs, 90-degree turns, and strong tidal currents. The Pacific North Coast is hit regularly with cyclonic storms that generate enormous storm waves. The confluence of a jagged rocky coastline studded with reefs and rock piles, together with hurricane-force winds that generate massive waves, make the proposed tanker route one of the most dangerous shipping environments in the world. Left alone to thrive, our coastal waterways are among the richest in the world. They include the feeding habitat of humpback and killer whales, along with migratory salmon routes and at least 650 spawning rivers. BC's wild fisheries, including commercial fishing, fish processing, and sport fishing, generate close to $1.7 billion combined each year. Nature tourism based on salmon is estimated to contribute more than $1.5 billion a year in value added to the BC economy. A catastrophic oil spill along the coast, like the BP Deepwater Gusher in the Gulf of Mexico and the Exxon Valdez in Alaska, would devastate marine animal habitats with horrible consequences for local communities, fisheries, tourism, the environment, and our BC economy for decades.
People of British Columbia need to realize that they're being set up the same way we were set up in Alaska. These oil men come in like this, that there will be no risk to the people. They promise state-of-the-art vessel traffic control systems, state-of-the-art cleanup response, state-of-the-art pipeline construction. And what I hear Enbridge saying is pretty much exactly what Exxon said, and what British Petroleum and what the other big oil company owners said. And there we were on March 24th, 1989, with an oil spill that basically changed the way we live. It changed our environment. They don't care. It's all about money with them.
And unlike Exxon's disaster in Alaska, once the dirty tar sands oil leaves the Kitimat port, Enbridge Incorporated of Calgary has no legal obligation to clean up a spill. The people who live in British Columbia would be left with that daunting task and a massive bill, along with the heartbreaking consequences to an entire way of life. The proposed tanker route would pass through the territories of 10 coastal First Nations, all of whom have joined together to ban the tankers from their waters.
After 10,000 years, it's incomprehensible for many of us to stand by and allow a project like the Gateway Project to proceed. We're prepared to take every action that's needed to ensure that this project doesn't go ahead, including standing in the line and going to jail, if that's what it takes.
If our environment is damaged, we fail to exist. And that's why we've seen such an upwelling of support from First Nations in the interior, the whole coast, all the way into Alberta. They know what this means. This really is the line drawn in the sand. We're not going to allow anybody to cross it, and Enbridge just happens to be the one that's here today.
It gets us excited to think that we're going to have a chance of polluting our pristine watersheds that this pipe is going to be going through, or polluting our pristine oceans. It doesn't make any sense. And what's it for? It's to make the oil industry richer.
It's the amount of damage one of these things could do here. Like, it's probably one of the richest and most intact ecosystems in the world. I mean, as Canadians, we've got something here that can't be duplicated in other parts of the world. Do your job. I mean, vote. Be a Canadian.
Recent polls show that 80% of the citizens of British Columbia are opposed to coastal tanker traffic. Clearly, the province will assume the risk of this dangerous project with absolutely no benefit if the pipeline fails or tankers spill. And sadly, as the devastating BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico demonstrates, catastrophic accidents happen, steel ruptures, safety valves fail, and emergency backup plans are just an illusion. Do we really want to risk unleashing an environmental, economic, and human rights catastrophe for the sake of Enbridge and big oil profits? Do we really want to encourage the expansion of Alberta's tar sands, Canada's fastest-growing source of greenhouse gas emissions? Before it's too late, please go to our website and join us in telling the federal government not to approve the Enbridge Northern Gateway Pipeline application. Urge the Prime Minister to implement a permanent tanker ban on the northern BC coast. Support First Nations title and rights to govern their territories. And call for federal energy projects that are consistent with a clean energy future. Together is the only way we will win this battle against Enbridge and big oil. And together, we can and will preserve our beautiful British Columbia for generations to come.